Habakkuk means to embrace. And it's primarily, of course, number 19 is the question, but it was primarily written to the southern kingdom, to Judah. And so number 19, Habakkuk shows that God does what? Yeah. Uses the wicked, in this case the Babylonians, to punish others. Okay. So number 20, most prophets that we've already studied about, they pled with the people on behalf of God. But what's unique about Habakkuk? Yeah, he pleads to God. And if you look at chapter 1 and verse 2, it says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry, and you will not hear? Even cry out to you, violence, and you will not save." So he is pleading directly to God instead of pleading to the people to come back to God. He's pleading to God, which is a little unusual or different than the other prophets had been doing. What's Habakkuk's big problem? Difficulty 21. What's going on? What doesn't he understand?
His is kind of like Jonah. He doesn't understand how enemies can profit. He doesn't understand how enemies can be favored by God.
Yeah, he doesn't understand why God is using the wicked. Yeah, somebody that's more wicked to punish them. I mean, Israel wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, they did a lot of wrong things, but the Babylonians were even worse. And so he has a difficult time understanding, why are you using these people to destroy, to punish Israel? And so he has a hard time dealing with that. But of course, we do know that God eventually destroys the Babylonians. He uses the Medes and the Persians to do away with the Babylonians. So God takes care of the wicked as well, but he does use the wicked to his advantage if he needs to. Number 22, quote Habakkuk 2 verse 4. What's that say? Yeah, and when you think about that, the just shall live by faith. The first ones that jumped to my mind, and of course it was in the teacher's manual too to point it out, but Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If anybody lived by faith, it was those four. I mean, look what they went through. And God took care of them. So, again, things in the Old Testament we need to learn from. We need to live by faith. God's going to take care of us. God's promised that he's going to take care of us. God's word shows how he fulfilled his promises, either by destroying people or taking care of people. You can, whichever way you want to look at it. We've looked at enough of it in the Old Testament that we see that God takes care of it. He does what he said he's going to do. He fulfills these things. He follows up on them. So we need to have faith. It might not be the outcome that we want. We might be desperately ill, and really having a hard time with our health, and we pray for better health or whatever. And, we might not get that, but still have faith in God, because what's our ultimate goal? To get to heaven, right? So we need to live by faith. We need to keep the faith. We need to stay in the faith. And so many times, I'm sure probably everyone in here knows somebody that's gone through a rough time, and rather than drawing closer to God, they go farther away from God. That's not the time to do that. There's been people, and probably you all know people as well, they were Christians for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, faithful, get almost to the end of their life. For whatever reason, depart the faith, leave the faith. Don't do that. Live by faith. Remember God's promises to you. The last one, what's Habakkuk 2 verse 20 say? Where's the Lord? He's in his holy temple, and what's the earth to do? Keep silent. In other words, don't argue with God. We've got so many people out there in the religious world today that especially, there's numerous topics that they want to argue about, but baptism is the big one. And they say, well, I just don't think that. I just don't think that's what that says. Or I don't feel that's what that says. I don't this, I don't that, I don't that. Don't argue. What's it say? Quit arguing with what's in the Bible. We've got enough proof that the Bible's accurate. We've already talked about that numerous times. We can back that up. It's God's Word. And especially when you get into the New Testament and a lot of your versions have the red letters. And, you got Jesus talking. You got God in the flesh talking. Why are we arguing with Him? Doesn't make sense. Keep silent. Let God do the talking and do what He says to do. Any comments about Habakkuk? I know we went through it pretty quick. Or Habakkuk, however you want to say it. All right. Well, as David Cottle says, through the modern technology or whatever, but in this case, it's not in this case modern technology. We're going to flip a couple pages over, a couple pieces of paper. All right. So we're going to jump in here to Zephaniah. The last we got what 4 books? Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Micah. The last 4 books. Zephaniah. Again, he's about the same time period as these others, about this 586, 612 BC, somewhere in there. He's working about the same time as Jeremiah, Naaman, and Habakkuk. He's talking primarily again to Judah, to the southern kingdom. They're all kind of working in conjunction together. Trying to do the same thing, trying to get the people to come back. So number 1, Zephaniah prophesied primarily to who? I just told you, to Judah. And he pointed out what? Yeah, all of the above. Their sins, which included idolatry, backsliding, you name it. They were kind of participating in it. All of these things. So much to the point, and it's listed, a lot of the things that they're doing in chapter 1, in verses 4 down through 6. And I do want to point out something when we read a couple of these. So starting at verse 4, it says, I will stretch out my hand against Judah and against all the inhabitants of Jerusalem. I will cut off every trace of Baal from this place. The names of idolatrous priests with the pagan priests, those who worship the hosts of heavens on the housetops, those who worship and swear oaths by the Lord, but who also swear by Milcom, those who have turned back from following the Lord and have not sought the Lord nor inquired of Him. All of these things that these people are doing, they're worshiping Baal, they were worshiping this other god, Milcom. But verse 5, if you'll notice, he talks about those who worship the hosts of heaven. What's that talking about? What do you think? Worshiping the stars. Anybody here like to look at the astrology, the astronomy, your zodiac. Yeah. A lot of people out there live by that kind of stuff. It goes against God's word. God says it's not true. It's false. Don't be relying on what you see, what people think they see in the stars. I mean, it's fun to look in the newspaper and see what your horoscope says. I mean, you can read it for fun. Don't have any faith in it. Don't take it to stock. Don't base your life on it, which so many do. Yeah. But these people were doing all of these things. Number 2, Zephaniah's day of the Lord refers to what? The upcoming punishment. course, we know that he would not have known that other than God telling him that. Let's see if there's anything else on Zephaniah that we need to hit on. Pardon me? We got one more. I'm sorry. Yeah. And then number 3, the book of Zephaniah closes with what?
Restoration.
Yeah, restoration, the promise of redemption. If you will turn away from all these idolatrous practices and all these other things that you're doing and come back to God, there's hope at the end of all of this. You're still going to go through this. You're going to go through this destruction, this punishment, this 70-year captivity is still going to take place, but there is hope at the end. And we do know that they do come back. But yeah, so it's not all doom and gloom. There is that hope. There is that promise of returning back to the Lord. The Lord's willing to take them back. Okay, so Haggai. So the last 3 minor prophets, they deal with after the captivity, which is the next question, number 4. It said the first 9 prophesied before the captivity, the return from captivity, and the last 3 are after the captivity. So Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi deal with the time after they come out of captivity, the Babylonian captivity. Want to get a new pair of glasses. Haggai means the feast of God. Somewhere in this 520 BC range again. He overlaps the teaching of Ezra. So again, they're kind of, again, they're all kind of in this same period. They're all kind of all working together here a little bit. Number 5, what housing problem did Haggai address? The temple was left unfinished. When they came back out of captivity, they all went and started building their homes, which nothing wrong with that, is there? The work sat still in the temple. They let it go over here and didn't do anything with it, which now they were under a decree to where they were not allowed to do it. We know that King Cyrus had issued the order allowing them to rebuild the temple, and then he died, and there was another king that came into place that said, no, you're not going to do this now for a little while. So then once Darius comes on the scene, Darius allows it to continue. He even, Darius actually paid for it once it actually started back up again. Darius actually provided all the materials and everything. But yeah, they went and left the Lord's house unfinished. And because of that, God withheld his blessings from them because of that until they went back and did it. So number 6, Haggai's prophecy deals with what? The rebuilding of the temple. Yeah, pretty much all of that book is dealing with the rebuilding of the temple. In Haggai chapter 2, 21 through 33, 21 through 23, not 33. What is the significance of that? He's speaking about Zerubbabel, who is the governor of Judah at this time. So what's significant about Zerubbabel? He's going to be told he's going to be like a signet, a signet ring or a signed ring. So what do you think? What do you think that's referring to? What's significant about that? Anybody got any comments, thoughts? Pardon me? You're close, yes. He is in the lineage of Christ. He is listed in the lineage of Christ. If you turn over to Matthew chapter 1 and verse 13, he is in the lineage of Christ. Matter of fact, we'll just go over there and look at it for a second. Chapter 1, verse 13, Zerubbabel. And as David Cottle says, there's an awful lot of begatting going on in that chapter. But Zerubbabel begot Abiud, and Abiud begat Eliakim, and Eliakim begot Azor. So he is listed in the lineage of Christ. There was something else that I wanted to point out, and I didn't write it down. So I'm not going to be able to remember. Anyway, that's what's significant about that is Haggai lists Zerubbabel, and who is in the lineage of Christ. I wish I would. There was something else about Matthew that one of those verses in Matthew was going to bring up. I don't see it. Okay. So anyway, kind of quick through Haggai, which we're kind of hitting all of them fairly quickly. But again, he's dealing with rebuilding the temple, same that Ezra was, which we talked about in the past. We do know that it was finished about 4 years later, after it sat idle for a period of around 16 years. So it is built, and God does return his blessings, his favor back to the people. So they're back in the good graces with God at this point in time. Any thoughts on Haggai? Okay, so now we'll look at Zechariah for just a few minutes. Again, chapters 1, verse 1. And this is how we can determine, the Bible historically accurate. You look at chapter 1, verse 1, it talks about this is taking place in the 8th month of the 2nd year of Darius. Well, through history, we can put a time frame to that. It's 520 BC, pretty much, give or take a year or so. So we have an accurate date that this is taking place in, going down in. It's happening. Zechariah is quoted 41 times in the New Testament. A lot of the New Testament writers reference these old verses in Zechariah, these prophecies, how they're fulfilled in the New Testament.
There's almost an Old Testament version of Revelation. There's so much prophecy.
Well, that's the answer to number 10. There's so much. We'll just jump down there real quick because it has what? Symbolic, figurative language. In Zechariah number 8, he's a companion to Haggai because it's primarily concerned with rebuilding the temple. Again, Zechariah, Haggai are trying to get the people, trying to get this work back up and running. It's important to get the temple rebuilt. In chapter 2 and verse 12, you'll see the term, now it depends on what version, what translation you're using, but you'll see the term Holy Land. We hear a lot of people talking about, well, we're going to make a trip to the Holy Land. We're going to go to the Holy Land. You hear that a lot. That verse, that's the only time that is used in the Bible, in the entire Bible. Just a little tidbit of information. I don't charge any extra for that. We hear that referenced a lot, but that's the only verse you'll find that used in the entire Bible. Zechariah prophesies 8 visions that deal with what? The restoration of Judah. That Israel, Judah would be another great nation. Jerusalem would be a great city again. So we'll jump down to number 11. We're not going to go through all these visions. We don't have time to deal with them all, but they all, in some sense, fashion, deal with the restoration of Judah and everything. But what's interesting about these is they all occur the same night. He has all these happen to him, visions, in one night. I'm sure a lot of you dream. If you're like me, you don't really remember much about the dreams. But, man, can you imagine having 8? And maybe we have 8 in a night. I don't know if I do or not. But it seems to me like you'd be wore out if you had 8 visions in one night. I don't know. especially with Bill. It gets up like 4 o'clock in the morning or 3:30 or whatever. But I can't imagine going through all these in one night. But what's the first one? What does he see the first one going on? Yeah, the man on the red horse. Yeah, okay. And then what's the next one? Yeah, 4 horns, 4 craftsmen, 4 carpenters. Let me jump over here real quick on something else. Chapters. Yeah, okay. And then what's the next one he deals with? Yeah, a plumb bob, measuring line, setting a level mark, a straight mark that they're trying to achieve. And then what's the next one? Cleaning. Yeah, I put down cleaning of the high priest. Cleaning, kind of making sure that they were in the right position, the right, what would be the term I'm looking for? The right, the proper dress, maybe mode, proper, being in the right relationship with God. Maybe deals with the cleaning of the high priest. Yeah. What's the next one? Yeah, the lampstands, candlesticks, and then the 2 olive trees. He deals with that in the next vision. And then what's the next one? F. Yeah, the flying roll. And that thing, if you look at those cubit dimensions, that thing is like 30 feet by 15 feet. I mean, this is, what he's seeing is massive. It's not something small. And then what's he got in G? Yeah, he's dealing with that woman. Yep. Okay. All right. And then what's the last one? And the 4 chariots are significant because of what? What do they represent? What did Nebuchadnezzar's dream that Daniel interpreted that talked about the statue and all that? What did all that represent? The 4 kingdoms. Yeah. So that's what these 4 chariots are dealing with. About the first chariot. Yeah, the first chariot is the Babylonians. The second one would be Medes, Persians. The third one would be the Greek. Fourth one would be the Romans. So that's the vision that he's seeing there. He's talking about the kingdoms that will be going, being established. That will be going on during all this time that's going on. And then lastly, what's the last thing that Zechariah deals with his prophecies? Yeah, the last days of Christ. And if you look at some of that, like Zechariah 9, verse 9 talks about, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt, a foal of a donkey, which of course we know that Jesus did that, and that's out of Matthew 21, verse 5. Zechariah 11, verse 12 talks about, so they weighed out my wages with 30 pieces of silver. Of course, we know that that's Judas in Matthew 27, verse 9. Zechariah 13, verse 7 talks about striking the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Of course, we know that the apostles all ran away. That's out of Matthew chapter 26, verse 31. Zechariah 12, verse 10 talks about they will look on me whom they pierced. And so, John chapter 19, verse 34, we know that the soldier pierced Jesus' side. Many people were looking at Jesus while he hung on the cross. John chapter 19 and verse 37. And again, Zechariah knowing this hundreds of years, prophesying this hundreds of years before it ever takes place. God working through Zechariah, prophesying this. Any other comments on Zechariah? We're doing good. Because I've got some other things once we get through Malachi that we're going to talk about before we transition into the New Testament next week. Okay, Malachi. Malachi lives about 100 years later than Haggai and Zechariah. So he's a little bit closer to the end, I guess, if you want to say, to the end of the Old Testament, to the coming of the Christ. Because of poverty and hard times, the people were questioning God's what? God's love for them. Yeah, they were dealing with a lot of hardship, which they brought it on themselves, but They question God's love. And, we're human. We do that sometimes. We hit a rough stretch of life, and we kind of get down in the dumps, well, this isn't working out like I thought it would, or I'm having a hard time with this, I lost my job, Kim was just telling me this today about a friend of hers that lost her job, lost her house, mom got real sick, had to put mom in a nursing home, and now mom's insurance won't pay for the nursing home, so mom's going to get thrown out in a couple of weeks. And this lady, talk about anybody who has the right to be down in the dumps. This lady has the right to be down in the dumps. Again, live by faith. Go back. God will take care of us.
Luke's last few lessons, evil, pain, and suffering.
Yeah.
It comes to us just like the world.
Yeah. Yep. God didn't promise us a bed of roses and all that stuff that the country songs all talk about, but keep the faith. God's love is always there. Number 14, Malachi lived in an age when worship had become profane, false, defiled, contemptible. Yeah. What were they doing with their sacrifices? They were bringing the worst of the worst. They were bringing animals that were lame, animals that were blind. The worst of the worst. I don't know how else you really describe it. Unbelievable that the animals that they were bringing for sacrifice. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, because that's the other thing. Their tithes and stuff, they were holding back on that. But we're going to talk about that here in a second. But yeah, the same thing. So they lived in an age when regarding the law, they kept it partially, poorly, a lot of times not at all. Yeah. They had a complete disregard for the law. They only kept parts of it or none of it at all sometimes. Unlawful what? Yeah, unlawful marriage and divorce. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more. But, they were not to marry who? The pagan people that were around them. Did they do that? Well, yes, they did. They did. I phrased it the wrong way. They did not obey God, and yes, they did marry these people. Yeah, I meant the other way around. Oh yeah, they weren't the first ones to do it after the captivity. This was going on way back. Yeah. And then D kind of comes back to what Jeff was mentioning. The people robbed God with their what? Yeah, their tithes, their money offerings. Yeah. Let's turn over and let's read that. Malachi chapter 3, verse 8. Let's take a look at that for just a second. Verse 8, will a man rob God? You have robbed me, but you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. Yeah. But not only in that, in their the way that they worshipped, or lack of worship, they were robbing God. They were robbing God by not keeping His law, His commandments concerning marriage and divorce. The animals that they were offering, they were robbing God that way as well. Let's see. There was something else I was wanting to hit on. Okay, we'll get to it here in a second. Can we rob God today? Can we be guilty of that? Absolutely. How would we be guilty of it? Okay. Time, money, pretty much the same way that they did. Yeah. We can rob God through our giving, through our time. Does God expect us? Does He want all of our time? Does He want ever 24/7? No. Yeah, Jesus fell asleep in a boat, didn't he? He was so tired. So yeah, He doesn't expect us to give all of our time, but He expects His fair share. Okay. So our money, our time, our worship. Yeah, you know, we can come here Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, but if we're just sitting here in this pew, just basically like we always talk about, just warming the seat, we're robbing God. If we're not actively participating in worship, if we're not paying attention to what's being said and done, participating in the singing, when somebody's leading a prayer, if we're not praying along, listening to what's being said, if we're not paying attention to the sermon, God's word that's being spoken, all of these things, we're robbing God. We're guilty of that. Number 15, Malachi prophesies deal with what? We already talked about the first one, robbing of God. And then what's he deal with in Malachi chapter 4? Coming of John the Baptist. He says there's going to be one like who? Like Elijah. Yeah, John the Baptist is referred to as like Elijah. He's telling these people there's going to be somebody else come. There's going to be another prophet coming. There's going to be another man that's going to be giving you more information. I'm not going to make you name the books of the New Testament, or the Old Testament, rather. Yeah, I'm not even going to go there. I was trying to sing it. I could sing probably the New Testament, but that Old Testament, that one, I can't do it. I was getting pretty close by the time we kind of quit doing it, but yeah. But yeah, Malachi winds down talking about the coming of this other man, this other prophet, John the Baptist. And we know, let me flip over this other page here. We know from the time frame that Malachi ends until when Matthew picks up, there's about a period of about 400 years in there. And what's significant about this, that we got about 4 minutes, and that's what we're going to talk about here for the last couple of minutes. What's significant in this time frame? Oh, that's a good catch. We know that the Medes and Persians have defeated the Babylonians and pretty much wiped them out. And the Greeks come onto the scene a couple hundred years after this and take care of the Medes and the Persians. They're led by Alexander the Great. And what's significant about that is the Greek language became pretty much a universal language. The Bible, even the Old Testament, even though it was originally written in Hebrew, was converted to Greek so that the majority of the people could read it and understand it. The New Testament, when it was written in Greek. The majority of the people could understand it. They were capable of reading it and knowing what was going on, what it was saying. And the Greeks remained in power for about 300 years, and then the Romans defeat the Greeks, just like Daniel prophesied, and same way that we looked at a minute ago in the other one. All talking about that these kingdoms were going to come and go, and so now we're into the Roman kingdom of the Romans, the Roman kingdom. And what's significant about the Roman kingdom is, they went in and they built a tremendous system of roads all throughout the known country. Very good roads, which made travel, of course, very easy. The other thing that they did was they were very mighty in military. So they had soldiers all over the place. So traveling these roads pretty much was pretty safe. I mean, we do know that there's places where there was problems. Of course, the Samaritan was beat up, and there are different things. Paul talks about traveling with a group of men, for safety and things. And the same way with us. When we travel, we pretty much feel pretty safe when we travel. But there are areas, there are times when there's problems or whatever. I mean, the police can't be every place all the time. Same way with the Roman soldier. But for the most part, the roads were very good, and it was pretty safe to travel. God used this time to do what? To establish, to bring Jesus into the world, to go through his ministry, to go through his death on the cross, and then in Acts chapter 2 to establish what? The church. And all of this taking place, these good roads, the safety to travel, all made it very easy for the disciples to do what? What to say, Matthew 16? Go ye into all the world Made it very easy, very convenient for them to do that. God knows what he's doing, knew what he was doing back then. All of this kind of takes place in this transition period between Malachi and when we get into Matthew. The other thing that's very significant about coming out of the Old Testament into the New Testament, of course, we all know this, well, we're out of time, but what was nailed to the cross? The old law. Are we under the old law? No, it was nailed to the cross. Jesus rose from the dead, but the old law stayed dead. We are not under the old law. He's going to ring the bell. I appreciate your time, your comments. I appreciate everything that you guys put up with me all through this last few quarters. And like I said, Kevin's going to take it for a little bit, and then I'll jump back in October 1st. Thank you. If you haven't picked up the stuff for the next quarter, it's up front, so make sure you get that and be ready for next week.